Thanks. It's really cool to be here. And it's, as a scientist, it's really fun to come this week to Provo because we have so many other scientists here. We have close to 1,000 other planetary scientists, people studying the solar system here in Provo. And a lot of these are from the US, some people from Europe and from other parts of the world. But we're pretty lucky in the US because we have a lot of people, we have a lot of astronomers here. We have a lot of researchers, we have a lot of scientists. But we're in a pretty unique position. The rest of the world isn't all that way. And so if you make a map of where most of the researchers are in the world, where most of the scientists, or if you do it in terms of per capita, so here we are in the US, and this is just color-coded in terms of the number of, the fraction of the population which is involved in research somehow. And let's see, I think this is a weak battery here. It's not really, okay. So in the US, it's about 1 in 200 people or so, maybe depending on how you define a researcher, is involved in scientific research, running programs. The US is not the top of that list. Actually, at the top of that list is Finland, which has about twice as many scientists per capita as we do. And China has about 1 in 1,000. South Africa has about 1 in 3,000. India has about 1 in 6,000. And way down at the bottom of the list, I'm not going to list them all, is Lesotho, which is a tiny country, and with a tiny fraction of those people who are scientists. And so in fact, in the whole country of Lesotho, I think it's about 20 scientists, according to UNESCO, in this small country. So, why are we interested in this? Who cares where we have the scientists? It's great that we have scientists, but why should the rest of the world too? Most countries, as part of their goals, have stated that they want to increase the scientific literacy of the country, and or maintain a level of scientific literacy, and maintain a level of science and technology competence in the world. And that's because the world has changed. I mean, it used to be that the majority of the people in the world 100 years ago were involved in agriculture and just producing food so that we could survive. And things aren't that way anymore. And so people have more interest in doing things such as explaining the world and exploring the world and the world around us. And countries without a high scientific literacy are at risk of, and we see this happening, of losing people because they want to, you have a brain drain from countries that are not developed, losing ties with other countries, and ultimately the country doesn't have the ability to maintain itself and take care of its people. And so these are the sorts of reasons why we're interested in the scientific abilities and the scientific development in different countries. So for much of the past decade, I've had the chance to live around the world. We've lived in Mexico City, and Pretoria, South Africa, and Mumbai, India. And this is courtesy of my wife's job. My wife is a diplomat with the State Department. She's a Foreign Service officer, and so as part of her post is she's posted to different embassies and consulates across the world. And so we've taken us and our now 3 kids to these posts usually in 3-year stints. And so I'm going to talk about what I've done in these different places. In all the places that we've been, I've been involved in doing outreach with the public, and that involves working with a lot of people, giving talks, and doing workshops and things like that. I've also been teaching at the university level, so much smaller number of people, but involved more deeply. And then I've also been able to maintain the research that I've been doing. I'm a member of the various NASA spacecraft teams, such as the New Horizons team, which is the one that's sent a spacecraft out to Pluto, and the Rosetta mission, which sent a European spacecraft out to a comet, and so forth. And so I've been lucky to be able to maintain doing that at the same time as living in these areas and doing research. So, Pluto is 6 billion kilometers away, and so whether we live in Mexico City or Mumbai or DC, it's about the same distance. So the world has changed. It's possible to do these sorts of things now, and it's great. So I'm going to talk about, kind of take you on a field trip of some of the things I've done in South Africa and in India. And when we talk about South Africa, the first thing that is dominant in the country is the effects of apartheid. And apartheid was this legal system where South Africa has about 60 million people. About 80% of those are black, about 10% are white. White and black are the terms that are used there, so that's the terms I'm going to use. And up until the end of apartheid in 1994, most of the population, 80% black population, was legally prohibited from doing the basic things like having an education, having a job, owning property, living where they wanted to live, and so forth. And in 1994, legally, apartheid ended. But you can't just change the, that was closed 20 years ago, 23 years ago. But if you go there now, the first thing you see is the ongoing effects of apartheid. Since you can't just change the legal status of 90% of the country and expect that things are going to change overnight. And so this is reflected in things like the fact that if you look at the income level of what the white versus black population, the average white income is probably 10 times what the average black income is now. And the unemployment rate among the black population is on order of 60 or 70%. And a lot of this just goes back to education, because the schools for most of the black population are terrible. The schools for most of the white areas are pretty good. Look at Elon Musk. The schools for most of the black areas are with teachers who aren't well educated and can't answer questions and don't have the background to answer, to teach the next generation effectively. And so there is a small, but definitely growing and definitely existent black educated middle class. I mean, if you look at the universities used to be all white in most cases, and now many of them are 50-50 or so forth. And so if this progress keeps going, it just takes a long time, but eventually progress will be made, but it's a long, slow path. So I spent 3 years in South Africa doing outreach in many of the schools and teaching at the university. So at University of Pretoria, which is the formerly all-white university in the capital city. So I was soon after I moved to South Africa, I was at a science festival, and this is a huge nationwide science festival focusing on township students. And I was at the lunchroom, and there was a group over in one corner by themselves, and I didn't know who they were. And I was like, well, I don't know, let's go over and sit down next to them. So I sat down with these people, and I'd met a lot of teachers before and a lot of students before, but I hadn't met this group, and they instantly were something different. They were the students were really, really engaged, and the teachers were right there with them, and they brought their best students with them. But these were bright students who were asking a lot of questions, and teachers who were with them there the whole way, and so it's really great. And they were unique, and so we kept in touch with them. And one of the students kept emailing me like, "You got to come out to visit our school," and I'm like, well, So eventually we set it up, and they were from a very rural village school. In a rural part of South Africa, in the province of Limpopo. And so if you look at that from a map, it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere here. So we got in the car and drove out there. It's about 4 hours you drive about 4 hours from Pretoria, and you go down the highway, and then you turn onto a road, and then you turn onto a smaller road, and then you turn onto a dirt road, and then the dirt road becomes dustier, and finally you get to the village of Mariquing here, and you get to the school, and there's the school right there. So this is Mariquing Senior Secondary School in Limpopo, and you can see it's basically 2 buildings there. And when I visited, they didn't have outhouses. I see from Google Maps that there's 3 outhouses that have just been built there on the left. So before, there's a lot of grass, and there's a lot of bush there, which is what you use. And so this school has about 200 students. This is what it looks like on the ground as you're approaching the school. And we didn't go directly to the school. I was there to spend a day doing astronomy, giving some talks and doing some workshops with these students. Where we first went is the largest building in the village, because that's where what we're using as an auditorium, and that's the church. So here's the church. we went in here. Here's the student on Aeneas who is the one who I've been in touch with and who had invited me to come out and work with the school. This is the principal, Joseph, and we're waiting as everyone was coming in here. And I sit down, and all the students come in, and we go through introductions, and this person's introducing this person, and so forth, and it's about an hour of that. And then the students stand up, and this is what happens. So I've given a lot of talks before, but I've never had a praise song for the spacecraft before. It's pretty awesome. So then I gave a talk about New Horizons. New Horizons is the NASA mission which was headed out to Pluto. This was about a year before, 2 years before it got to Pluto. It's now gotten to Pluto, and it spent basically 24 hours observing Pluto, and now is going onward out to what we call the Kuiper Belt, beyond Pluto. And so, Pluto's the underdog planet. It is a real planet. Everybody loves it. And so, woo! But everybody there loves Pluto too. And so it's an exciting thing to talk about because we have a spacecraft that's going out there, and so it's cool. And so we talked about Pluto, talked about New Horizons, talked about many students, of course, are interested in this is a high-achieving school. Most of these kids graduate. Many of them go on to college. Many of them have interest in going on to colleges and ultimately studying either in South Africa or in other countries. So important part is talking about those chances. So we're done with the talk. We need to go back to the school. How do we go back to the school? Most people walk, but the principal drove. This is his car. It works great, except it doesn't have a starter. So the kids need to push the principal's car to get him back to the school. So here we are at the school. This is the school here. These are the two classroom buildings. And so I spent, first talk was talk about New Horizons, and then we made comets out of dry ice. So comets are basically dirty snowballs or snowy dirt balls, and come from the outer solar system. And you can make your own comet pretty easily if you just take some dry ice and some water and some organic molecules such as ammonia or sugar and some dirt, and you put them all together. And it's the same stuff which makes up a real comet, and it's exciting too because it has all this CO2 sublimating off of it and all this. And so comets are relevant to South Africa. There's a number of comets that were passing around, that were visible from the Earth and potentially could have been visible in the upcoming season from South Africa. So it was something which was relevant to be talking about. And so we spent part of the afternoon making comets and playing with dry ice and talking about observing the solar system like this. It's lunchtime. This is the cafeteria, and this is the chef, and she's making mealie pop, which is essentially a ground white cornmeal for everyone. And so in the afternoon, we talked about the thing that everybody loves talking about is are there aliens out there? So astrobiology, and so we talked about looking for life in the universe. This is a talk we did in the school. Has a brand new chemistry lab, science lab, which was a corporate donation from one of the big insurance companies in South Africa, which had realized the achievements of this school. And so these are enthusiastic kids. They were very engaging. They asked a lot of questions, and the school doesn't have much. There's at this point no toilets at the school. There's no phone. There's no computers. This is the one water tap they have. So I stayed for the evening, We waited for, they did a bit of soccer, so we waited for the sunset. And I brought a couple of telescopes with me, so we had a star party at night and got to see Saturn, see the moon. Students, parents, villagers, other people around all came out for the star party. And it's really great because we see the same stars that they do. And they see Saturn every night passing across. But they didn't necessarily know that it was Saturn. They hadn't seen the rings going around it. And just with a small telescope, you're able to see that. And it really revolutionizes your view of the sky that you see every night. The skies are dark. It's Africa, so it's really nice. This is the principle. I just see over and over again how much the effects of one person really influences the growth and development of hundreds or thousands of people. The graduation rate of this school is close to 100%, which is very, very high, much higher than the vast majority of schools, white or black, in South Africa. And this is the science teacher I was working with, Mr. Waswa. And he also has had such a huge influence on these students. So many of the students here, students came from other schools in the surrounding area to go to the talks that I gave there. And so some of them were from a school about an hour away called Dendron, and this is a much larger school. And so they were in touch with me, and they were like, "You got to come out to Dendron sometime." And so about a year later, I made it out to Dendron School. And so this is a larger school that has about 1,200 students. It's a boarding school many people come from a couple of hours away. And it's science focused. And so you can see the school buildings up there. It's been running there for about 20 years with the same principle. And so they have an astronomy club there. Here's the presidents of the astronomy club. And again, there were students visiting from other schools as well. And so I talked about Pluto, and I talked about New Horizons. I've given the same talk about New Horizons at least 100 times. And you don't need to give a new talk every time because it's new to them, even if it's not new to me. So it's an exciting thing to talk about. One thing I loved is that sometimes in many schools, students are taught to not ask questions because either it's a waste of time or it's a distraction or the teachers don't know the answers, and so it's embarrassing. But at this school, they asked more questions than anywhere else that I've been. And we had longer, we had longer time devoted to doing Q&A than to the talk itself, and that's great. I mean, I can ask students questions on this stuff forever. So it's really exciting to see that sort of engagement from these students. I brought a telescope with me that I couldn't move from South Africa, so I left it with the Astronomy Club, and what they did is we had a couple of training sessions where they used the telescope both at night and during the day to look at sunspots, and they actually are doing star parties for other schools, and so they host it. They have the expertise to use the telescopes and navigate through the sky, and they invite other schools at night to come to their school, which is pretty cool. A lot of educational materials that are made by NASA and made by other groups are put online now. That's the normal way in the US to distribute things, for sure. And that doesn't work everywhere around the world. These students don't have smartphones, and they don't have a web browser, and they can't go to a YouTube page because the bandwidth doesn't exist and the hardware doesn't exist. And so actual printed material and physical objects have a lot more significance than anything electronic. This is probably changing, but this is as of a couple years ago. And so just a little bit of feedback from the teachers and students there. Genuinely speaking, in 30 years, I doubt that the school has had an event bigger than yesterday's, which is like, I didn't do anything. I just showed up there and gave a couple of talks like I would give talks anywhere, right? And but in the minds of the people there, this is something which has never happened there before. And likewise, on the right here, this student put on Facebook. At Magic Wing, we are proud of being visited by one of the greatest scientists on this planet Earth. And I can assure you that this is a falsehood. But in the minds of students, whatever they think. So anyhow, so you are, when you give talks like this, you do turn it into an instant rock star in these people's minds. And it makes it easy and it makes it fun. I have stayed in touch with a number of these students. up atop. He's engineering student at University of Pretoria. She was selected by the US Embassy to do a leadership training program in the US. He's studying economics. He's becoming a science teacher. So while not everybody goes on to these, there's a large number who do. So that's Africa. I'm going to talk about where we are living now. We've been in India for 2.5 years. And the big thing about India is that it's big, population-wise. It has about 20 times the population of South Africa in 2 times the surface area of South Africa. So it's dense. And this contributes to everything. Lack of sanitation, lack of healthcare, lack of cleanliness, lack of food, everything. It's a poor country. Average income is a couple of dollars a day, $10 a day. And there's a lot of high-achieving stuff in India. India is a rapidly changing country, and there's many great universities, for instance. But many of these great universities are not big enough to support the number of people who want to come there. And so they have very low admission rates. And so the vast majority of people remain uneducated. But on the other hand, India has achieved great things. This is the 2,000 rupee note. It's worth about $30. And this is their Mars orbiter mission, which launched and which got to Mars in about 3 years ago. And there's only 4 countries that have ever done that. And India did it cheap and fast and got there on the first time. And so it's an amazing accomplishment. So I've given a lot of public talks, sort of done the same things in India that I've been able to do in the other countries. A lot of engagement, both on the public level, giving talks and teaching at universities and working with researchers in the country. So I'm just going to tell you about two things that I've done in India, which are sort of characteristic of give you insights into what's going on. So there's an engineering. I was contacted by a group of students at an engineering college that I'd never heard of, in a city I'd never heard of, in rural Tamil Nadu, which is in the south. And this is the town of Trichipalli. And they were like, oh, we have this festival, we have all these great speakers out there, you should come out and give a talk. And it seemed interesting, so I signed up for it. And and they sent me their material, and sure enough, they have like this amazing list of speakers. And who all is on here? Well, she won the Nobel Prize down at the bottom there, and above her is the director for the Mars orbiter mission, and Bill Gates came a couple of years ago. This guy is the guy who made up all those languages on Game of Thrones and other shows. And there's this like awesome, he was really cool. He gave it this amazing talk. And so there's these are like kind of really world-class people. And so it's pretty amazing. So I show up there, and what do I see? My first view of the campus is here we are. So it's basically cinder blocks set on dirt, at the campus. So I gave my talk. I talked about New Horizons, and other visitors gave their talks, and it's amazing. This is an amazing experience because it wasn't just talks. This is a 3-day festival celebrating science, celebrating engineering. And you have about 10,000, 15,000 visiting students, some from other colleges, some high school students. They're running competitions. This is a competition where the students have programmed these Arduinos to do remote control navigation through a maze. Over here, I guess, their vehicle got stepped on, so they're repairing it there. They're doing competitions to build flip-flops and other circuits. And this was really cool. This is the Robot Wars where they build these machines they have like saws on them and hitters and stuff like that, and they're just trying to destroy each other. And I think they sometimes lose limbs and things, but it's really fun to watch. And it's India, so there's meanwhile there's like tons of old 1,000-year-old temples just down the street and old palaces and things like that. And so this ancient history that they have is just as important as all of the modern development that they're doing. And you see all sorts of interesting things. This guy, he runs a cell phone repair shop, and he had all these crazy ideas for I'm going to build a solar-powered rocket. It's going to take these solar cells and make hydrogen, then we're going to burn the hydrogen and get up there, and it's cool. And so they're coming up with, and this is his son here, And they're you know, I don't know whether that's going to work or not, but there's such innovation, such creativity going on in the country. And all of this is done by students. This is not a class. They don't get money from the university for this. Nobody gets credit for it. These festivals are put on by hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteer work from each of these students who do all of the planning and arm twisting and publicity and fundraising and getting donations and so forth to recruit speakers and raise money and so forth for this. And this is cool. I mean, this is an amazing experience that I don't see happening like at schools in the US. I know that when I was a student, I didn't get to do anything like this. And you know, most of our things we do aren't related to our major. And to be able to have experiences by putting on things like this would be an amazing experience. And it's so neat to see this happening somewhere else completely unknown. So, okay, one more thing. This is a view from the top of our flat in Mumbai. And it's a big city, right? There's 25 million of our closest friends living here in Mumbai. And there's not much of a sky there, but if you look, you can see things. And so, you know, here's the moon and Venus and Mercury, and there's a couple of stars there as well. And so I even before we moved to India, I looked around and I saw there were some amateur astronomy clubs there, and they had these very detailed programs where you go to this place and you go to this place, and then you wait for the train and whatnot. And so I wrote to them once we were in India. I was like, hey, can I come out to one of your things and give a talk and see what you're observing out there and so forth. And so I set this up, and they were like, okay, get on this train. And so I get on this train at this time, and because that's what everybody does in Mumbai to get around is take these local trains. And I'm actually with some students here, and so we're going on this like long, slow second-class train out to the end of the line. It's about 2 hours away from the station in downtown, all the way out over here. But sure enough, we're getting outside of the city a little bit, and it's a little bit darker out there. And there's about 200 people who've made it out there. We get there a little bit before sunset. And all these students, people from the public, amateur astronomers, a huge group of people. They're checking in to observe. Here's the amateurs setting up. They have these big 10-inch telescopes that they're setting up for observing for the night. So they had it set on Venus just as Venus was setting. Her name was Spica, but she'd never seen the star Spica. And so she was really excited to see that for the night. And the first thing that was happening is this star tour for 200 people. Everybody brings blankets and sits on the dust out there and observes the sky. And it's not the darkest sky in the world, but you can see a lot of stars there. And they don't complain. It's just let's go out and see what we can see. And there's still some light that comes from Bombay, and it's dusty because there's a lot of agriculture and industry nearby and so forth. But you can see a lot more if you look than if you don't look. So. And where else can you be doing observing and then have these tasty Indian veg thali platters brought around? So that's pretty cool. And so it's 12:30 in the morning, and they're like, okay, doctor, time for your seminar. And so I've never given a talk at 12:30 in the morning, but if you do, and it's cold, and 200 people have come out there, and they're still awake, then that means that they're really engaged and they really want to be there. So this is fantastic. So we talked about New Horizons. We talked about Pluto again. That's exciting. And then after the talk, we go out and observe again, since Saturn was up by that point and Jupiter was up. And 4:30 in the morning, okay, it's time to break. It's time for the chai break. And so we break. Everyone has chai. And a little bit more observing before we fold up and put the telescopes back on the train and come back. And so this is fantastic because these people really want to be out there, and we're lucky to have this world, and I'm lucky to have these people who want to explore it with us. So the sort of person-to-person work that I've done. It's kind of on a small scale, and it's sort of complementary to these larger programs. There's a lot of large international programs of development that are happening in these countries. South Africa and India are both parts of large telescopes that are being built. There's one called the TMT, the 30-meter telescope. There's one called the SKA, the square kilometer array. And both these countries are big players in that. But oftentimes people ask, why are you spending billions of dollars on that when you have lots of people to feed too? And I think the answer there is that two things. One, that that a lot of this, as countries evolve and as countries grow and develop, then they need to develop scientific and engineering capabilities in order to grow and in order to be part of the future world without being dropped behind. And science is worth doing. And this quote from the white paper from the South African government says, "Not to offer science or not to offer physics and astronomy would be to take a negative view of our future, the view that we are a second-class nation, chained forever to the treadmill of feeding and clothing ourselves." So it's part of dreaming and moving a country forward. So it's been really fun doing all this work. And what I find is, everybody's the same, right? So, whether it's a kindergartner in Africa or whether it's, advanced scientists here, everyone's asking the same three questions in every Q&A session is like, are there aliens out there? What happens if you stand next to a black hole? And how did you get that spaceship out to Pluto? And all these questions are fun, and talking with people is exciting, and they're curious. And so astronomy is sort of a unique connection between people because everyone can see the sky, and everyone has questions about the sky, and it has this combination of being very tangible but also being mysterious because it's a long way away. Kind of like dinosaurs, they're dangerous but they're dead, so they're sort of safe. And no one is really anti-Saturn. No one is really no one's like anti-Velociraptor. So I feel really lucky to be in this field where astronomy is so exciting to lots of people. So I know that a lot of people in this room probably get the chance to travel around and may have the chance to go abroad and maybe are interested in giving talks sometime. So. Just the things that have helped me a lot is sitting down next to people you don't know, because that's what got me to talk to a lot of rural village schools in Africa. These putting yourself out of your comfort zone. And I also do this just because I'm lazy and hedonistic, and so it's easy to talk about astronomy, right? So why not just do it? People keep clapping, and So the stuff that you enjoy is the stuff that you're good at, and maybe the stuff that other people like as well. You turn into you're an expert in this stuff. People appreciate it. There's lots of ways to get involved. The U.S. Embassy does more than just issue passports, and there's a lot of cultural affairs officers and scientific officers at many of the embassies. And consulates across the world. And many of these people are very interested in setting up, if you're a scientist or if you're involved in other areas, you should consider getting in touch with them and offering, hey, I'd like to see if there's a talk that I could give. Many embassies and consulates have science centers or have reading rooms and libraries where they invite people to come in and listen to lectures from visitors. And so this is a fantastic program that they could set up for you if you get in touch with them. Or talk to local schools, talk to universities and science centers, and offer to give a talk. And you're a huge inspiration to people when you visit. They're probably an inspiration to you too. It goes both ways. So thank you for coming.
So it's delightful in your slides in Africa to see so many women involved in the group there too. It looked like it was a pretty balanced group. Is that, anyway, can you comment on that?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, especially at the high school level, there was a ton of involvement. I mean, it's pretty balanced from both women and men. Yeah, for sure. And I think at the university level as well. It's in India things are I think quite a bit more disparate, but in Africa, yeah, and it's really great to see that. So there's more challenges. For instance, if in many cases the schools, if they don't have if they don't have restrooms, if they don't have toilets, then it's a lot harder for women. When they have their periods, many of them don't have, without privacy, they don't. Sorry, there's high dropout rates because of that affect women, and this is an ongoing problem that is working on being addressed. So.
Are there practical ways that we can help with that?
Are
there institutions that are helping to address
Yeah.
that?
I do not know directly, but I hear people shouting out things, so listen to them.
Days for girls.
Thank you. Days for girls. Go. Yeah.
Sorry, can you go back a couple slides to
Yeah.
that statement you got by the South African government on the importance of science study?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was good. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. What was probably the most exciting part for you of this whole outreach experience that you've had over the last 7 years?
Gosh, I mean, there's just like seeing the contrasts between almost everything is kind of unexpected. Seeing rural Africa and how different that is from what's going on in townships in very urban Africa, and how different that is both from rural India and urban India. So the world is such a huge place, and it's like, I mean, I'm just like excited every day to go out there and see what I haven't seen before. So every day is the most exciting.
How much of your time is spent working on the New Horizons project compared with how much time is spent doing outreach?
So all the outreach that I've talked about is basically volunteer work. NASA funds my research both on New Horizons, which is mostly analyzing data and preparing for our future encounter on the Kuiper Belt. And then I have a couple of other research programs going on as well. So it's just kind of a balance. Sometimes it's if I go off for a week doing outreach, then I make up for that later doing more research. So. Yeah.
Did you ever notice a language barrier when you were in different areas, or did you end up having to learn specific languages?
Yeah, so both, English is one of the official languages in both South Africa and in India, and but it's the only language that I know that's spoken in there. Not everyone's, even though English is an official language, it doesn't mean that everyone's English is great, but especially among school kids, it's usually decent enough. Yeah. Yes, please.
Well, I just want to ask a question. It seems like you've been around the world doing your searching, discovery, doing your presentation. So what do you learn from the planet, though? For example, like Pluto, you look like you love to study about Pluto. What did you learn about how they work and stuff like that?
Yeah. So even though I've talked to all of them about Pluto, I haven't talked to you about Pluto. So if you want to stick around for another hour, I'll do that. But basically the short deal with Pluto is that we had never been there before, and we sent this spacecraft out there before. And even from Hubble, the best resolution we could see on Pluto was about 2 pixels across. And what we got from sending our spacecraft out there were these amazing images that are about 5,000 pixels across by 5,000. And so what that does is it just tells us about the history of the solar system. It tells us about the physics which is going on in the outer solar system. It shot many of our theories about how what was happening on the inside of Pluto, because Pluto is really active and it looked like it was a lot younger than what we thought it was. And so for more about Pluto, search online for the mission is called New Horizons, and there's some great stories and so forth on what we've found out there. Yes?
What are some ways we ourselves can encourage and inspire others to delve in the world of astronomy, physics, and the other sciences?
What are some ways that what?
We can encourage and inspire others to delve into astronomy, physics, and other sciences.
I think that, let's see, I guess I don't even think of encouraging them to, except that it's just like I just sort of talk about what is fun for me. And I think a lot of times people find that exciting and interesting themselves because they have so much curiosity from that. I think that, science isn't always the most obvious job to do, especially in the developing world. There are more practical things like, engineer, for instance, in both India and South Africa. People have a lot more interest in doing engineering than doing science, but that's A-okay. I mean, engineering is a pretty great thing to do, and these countries can benefit from having more engineers, more people asking questions, and more people doing careful, organized thinking about how to attack a problem. And so that's all good. And I think that just getting people to think and getting people to communicate and ask questions and do what they're interested in doing, and go to school and stay in school is that's where it's at.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming, for staying until the end. Let's go ahead and thank